I'm Dr. Samuel Allen Alexander, mathematician and philosopher, still here. And I'm going to read HackerNews comments on an article, Mathematicians Issue Warning as AI Rapidly Gains Ground. Andai says, quoting the article, mathematics produces not only a body of results, but also understanding, clarity, and judgment among the communities of mathematicians who have shaped them, often in the context of their own autonomously guided research. This expert knowledge is essential both to effectively use mathematics and to continue to articulate new and significant research questions. Then Andai ceases quoting the article and adds his own thoughts, saying, in a word, the job of the mathematics department is not only to produce mathematics, but mathematicians. Similarly, the output of programming is not only a program, but also a programmer. It is you. Outsourcing the work deprives you of who you become by writing it. Well, yes and no. I would agree that mathematics is about the mathematicians. In fact, that's one of my pet theories, that when we talk about the different branches of mathematics, especially contemporary, current-day mathematics, it's almost more that it's about the people involved rather than the subject under question. Of course, it tends to solidify around subjects in question, but that's only because of the people involved. 0xPGM replies saying, outsourcing the work deprives you of who you become by writing it. And he then says, just because AI can do something that resembles work should not mean outsourcing work to it. Mathematicians should not outsource their work to AI, just like programmers should not outsource programming to AI. Humans working with AIs in a tight loop means intellectual work becomes more high-level and creative, but a human should always own the work, validate it, and stake their reputation to it. Simply ban any humans who produce low-quality work using AI. I think I would agree 100% with 0xPGM. AI is a tool, and it's one which I believe will allow us to do higher-level mathematics, and hundreds of years from now, people will look back at pre-2024 mathematics and it'll look rather primitive, similar to how you would opine about a paper. Say you read an enormous 100-page paper calculating the area under a parabola, written shortly before the fundamental theorem of calculus became a thing, which absolutely trivializes that problem. I think we'll have a similar sort of situation, and I'm drooling imagining the kind of mathematics which we're going to see pop out in decades to come. Anyway, Eric M. Serre says, I don't think that is possible. Humans have always taken the path of least resistance, especially when it comes to work/school. The idea that we just trust everyone to carefully check and learn from AI output as our barrier to human skill sets eroding is never going to work. There is an Anthropic engineering post on HackerNews front page that addresses this exact issue. Supervise the agent's behavior via a human in the loop. Cloud code previously protected against agents taking unintended actions by asking users for permission at each turn. Theoretically that works, but we found the approach to be fallible. Our telemetry shows that users approved roughly 93% of permission prompts. The more approvals a user sees, the less attention they pay to each, becoming over time much less diligent in their supervision. Well, I think humans in general are lazy whether they have AI or not. And even before AI, I think the vast majority of publications in all academic fields, including mathematics, were basically garbage, intended solely to add bullet points to CVs. And I don't think that is particularly a function of AI. I think that's been the case for quite a while. It's rather a function of how we measure humans. And if anything, I hope that maybe AI will give us the impetus to reform how we measure academic output, which God knows we need to change how we measure. And I then replies to the reply with a link to Wikipedia article Normalization of Deviance and says, yeah, I'm seeing this with the attitude towards AI, especially as the economic benefits increase, will justify increasingly reckless approaches, probably until some major catastrophe. That seems to be how these things go, yes. Regulations are written in blood. AI has not yet spilled much blood, so not much regulations have been written so far. Let's go back to top level commenting. Tursmo says, much of math or science research has the strange quality of being mostly curiosity-driven, but having giant benefits that occasionally spin out to the public. Some questions are more urgent and practical. My feeling is that the more directly practical a question is, the more likely the research community is to support AI usage in that question. This reminds me of a sort of joke I used to bring up, that we justifiably demonize athletes who use chemicals to enhance their performance, but somehow that leaks into like doctors. And if it was found that a world-class surgeon achieved his or her tremendous surgical success through the help of certain psychoactive chemicals, they would be demonized just like athletes. But that makes no freaking sense, because we want our surgeons to save lives. If they do so through the help of ADHD medicine, more power to them. Anyway, that's going a little off topic. To continue reading Ursmo says, the annoying thing about recent AI advances is that they target questions on the wrong end of the spectrum. Erdish problems are exactly the sort of useless questions that people might answer purely for the love of the game. The sort of questions that a young person might cut their teeth on and gain confidence. Solving questions like these automatically, I think, is not good for the long-term health of research. At least for the foreseeable future, you still would like people to become interested and develop skills in these fields. These developments, and especially how they are presented, directly discourage that. I don't know. It's hard to say. One thing we might see, and this is purely speculation, but one thing we might see is we might see a situation develop where new mathematicians or prospective mathematicians work on problems despite those problems being trivial with the help of AI, and then instead of publishing them in journals, which is what currently is the sort of expectation, rather they would share their solutions with an AI, and then the AI would praise them or help them find ways to improve and so on and so forth. And I think if the AI was good enough, this would give you all the benefit that Tursmo is talking about here, and it wouldn't cost the community anything, because I love undergrads to death, and I'd rip my heart out in order to help them. But my God, it's not pleasant soldiering through their work. You do it because they need a mentor to guide them. You generally don't do it because the papers are 10 out of 10 papers. No, sir. Tursmo continues saying, solving questions like these automatically, I think, is not good for the long-term health of research. At least for the foreseeable future, you'd still like people to become interested and develop skills in these fields, these developments, and especially how they are presented directly to discourage that. Again, just replace the peer reviewers with AI and let the journals handle the really groundbreaking papers. I think that would be a huge improvement of things, and if the AI is good enough, then the students will improve with the AI being peer reviewer. Anyway, Math Dandy replies saying, to me, the most interesting feature of the OpenAI solution of the unit distance Erdish problem is that the solution, using deep algebraic number theory as a source of extremal combinatorial/geometric constructions, is much more interesting than the problem's elementary statement might lead one to expect. Well, it's mathematics. This happens all the time. Fermat's last theorem is trivial to state and leads to a vast universe of new mathematics. Anyway, Math Dandy continues and says, writing off Erdős's problems as random, useless, or meaningless dismisses his mathematical intuition second to none and strikes me as somewhat uncharitable. Erdős's intuition is not second to none. Quite a few people have that intuition. Erdős, it was sort of a cultural phenomenon. And don't take that as me belittling him. Erdős was a massive, massive influence to me, one of my biggest role models, and still is to this day. Anyway, finally, I agree that AI threatens mathematical training by rendering an entire class of acolyte-level research problems solvable by prompt, but the unit distance problem is not of that class. PF Dietz says, this is reinforced the idea that much more interesting than the problem's elementary statement might lead one to expect. That's reinforced by the immediate human use of the idea to resolve in the negative another significant problem, the sum product conjecture on reals. And he links to what he's talking about. Turismo says, I don't think Erdish problems are useless myself. I put useless in quotes to emphasize that they are the sort of research that doesn't have an immediate application, and so their automated resolution should be weighed against the sociological cost, as opposed to, say, drug discovery. Now, again, say I'm this hypothetical new up-and-coming mathematician, and I want to cut my teeth, so I work on an Erdish problem, and I solve it. Well, that gives me all the benefit. Now, whether I publish my solution in a journal or whether I share it with my AI assistant to get feedback, assuming the AI assistant is sufficiently good, this doesn't change the extent to which I have exercised my mathematical brain. So I think it's all a red herring. And I hope that in future mathematicians will still be able to benefit from Erdish problems, just not necessarily get research credit for it. But the point is to become a better mathematician. The research credit, that's just extra on the side. Dan Brooks says, I am not a mathematician and did not read the unit distance solution too carefully, but my impression was that it used a variation of a known technique to solve the problem. And that makes perfect sense to me. There are a lot of techniques and a lot of less relevant problems. I'm not surprised that one can solve some of them with known techniques that just nobody has tried hard enough before. I'm much more skeptical when it comes to the important unsolved problems where every known technique has probably been tried several times over. In those instances, it will probably take a true leap in understanding to solve them, and I am skeptical that large language models are well suited for that because of the way they work. Yeah, I generally agree with what Dan Brook is saying here. In fact, I have fantasized about a situation where maybe you take all math papers and look at all pairs of them, and for every pair of math papers, have an AI check whether these papers have some incredible synergy or incredible resonance that nobody has gotten around to noticing just because there's so many pairs. And along similar lines, it's probably true that you won't solve the Riemann hypothesis just by happening to try a technique on it that nobody's tried before, which just happens to work. But perhaps you try a pair of two different techniques on it, and people have tried each of those techniques individually but never tried the pair together, and I don't know, maybe that could give you a solution to the Riemann hypothesis. Of course, that AI has a long way to go before we're there. Math Dandy says, we're very fortunate to have had some very eminent mathematicians backfill the OpenAI proof with history, context, and a literature review. Ideas behind the proof seem to have been in the air. Indeed, looked at certain point of view, the OpenAI construction can be viewed as a high-dimensional generalization of a known low-dimensional one. In this vein, see the remarks of Gowers, Sowen, and Zimmerman. Are LLMs capable of true leaps in understanding? I have absolutely no idea, but LLMs keep surprising me. This idea about the proof being in the air, it reminds me of something Hegel talks about, that we kind of place too much fame on the people who make these big discoveries, when really they're just born at the right time, and if the discoveries were sort of in the air, and those people just happened to pluck them. Going up to higher level, Love Me Not says, quoting, at least for the foreseeable future, you still would like people to become interested and develop skills in these fields. These developments, and especially how they are presented, directly discourage that. Then Love Me Not replies saying, this assumption may well turn out to be correct, but it is not self-evident. Nearly everyone who has ever got interested in mathematics got discouraged at some point and they left the field. Mathematics is very hard. Those very few that remained certainly have talent, but they also have characteristics that are necessary for success in a competitive field, which are perhaps less valuable per se. Such characteristics as may be overrepresented in males, for instance. This is not a point about gender differences, but about the intrinsic merit of different success factors. It seems equally possible that the above assumption will turn out to be diametrically incorrect. People that would have been discouraged before LLMs will now retrain their curiosity longer. Democratization is surely a possible outcome. Arguably, chess has never been as popular and accessible, and that Dustbin fell to AI 3 decades ago. I love this comment, and I think Love Me Not is onto something here, and what it makes me think of is, Love Me Not talks about how many people who were interested in mathematics, they got discouraged and left. Probably the majority of people, by which I mean only a minority of people who are interested in mathematics actually become mathematicians. And he gives this example of gender, but I think an even more interesting example would just be this sort of boneheaded stubbornness, which honestly I think quite a lot of academics suffer from. And I don't think that's a good thing. And I think that it's an unintended consequence of the way academia is set up right now, that people who sort of have this just incredible patience and ability to take abuse have an advantage in academia. And as a result, a lot of academia, I think, consists almost of these traumatized people suffering from, what do you call it, where the captor, the captive falls in love with the captor. They've just been abused by academia to such an incredible extent, and they're kind of broken people. And those are the only kind of people who can survive in academia in the current in the current way academia is set up. Anyway, Azera says, do you not think that solutions to air dish problems might end up stepping stones to other important problems, either by introducing new tools or by proving things that were previously unproven that end up helping in unexpected ways? That's often how math goes, isn't it? At least that's the narrative. Big Green Jorts says, sounds like yet another example of how AI is kneecapping industries from the bottom by removing the barrier to entry, but really just removing the training path by doing the work itself with no guidance for juniors. Then Scott Lobster says, yep, and if history is any guide, the only way to play it is to take part and get rich while you can, or play the super long game and be positioned for the collapse. Businesses will not adapt until they are incentivized to do so, and very few businesses have a multi-decade outlook. Even before AI, the senior 10 times employee who retired and took all his domain knowledge with him because there was never any funding to train his replacement was a problem. Again, now here they're sort of transferring the problem to the field of professional software development, but I think we could see the same sort of situation. Now, currently, the sort of pipeline for software development is you start as a junior dev, and you're kind of not contributing much, but everyone acknowledges it's just sort of a necessary phase which you need in order to grow. And there's the fear that AI will chop that out of the pipeline. There will be nothing for those juniors to do, and so the argument goes, it'll be impossible to become senior. But just as I was saying above, you can replace the higher level dev mentor with an AI mentor. The prospective wannabe programmer can write their program and get feedback on it from the AI if the AI is good enough. And then there's no more need to burden the senior dev with this mentorship process. Will AI get that good? I don't know. But if AI gets that good, then that would be a replacement for the current pipeline, and I think it would actually be much better than the current pipeline, where the seniors spend quite a lot of time. Essentially, they waste a lot of time. Well, I don't want to use the word waste. It's not wasted, but they spend a lot of time mentoring juniors, and if an AI could mentor the juniors instead, then that would be purely an improvement. At the top level, Fastrick says, it seems to me that when you have a tool that automates part of the work, it doesn't make the curiosity go away. It changes the landscape of what problems humans find interesting. Many Erdish problems are no longer a good entry-level benchmark for a researcher, but that's going to drive young researchers to explore other areas that might have been out of reach before AI-human collaboration. Yes! Fastrick is speaking my language. Yeah, the landscape is going to totally change, but it'll be replaced by a new landscape, and honestly, I am really eager to see what that new landscape is going to be like. I think we're going to see some astoundingly cool mathematics if the AI hype turns out to be correct. Enough of that for now. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.